Record to the cloud. Great. Okay, Rachel.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us today for our online poetry session, The Refuge of Witnessing with Adam O. Davis. So Adam was born in Arizona and grew up in France, New Jersey, Scotland, and Utah. His debut poetry collection, Index of Haunted Houses, winner of the Catherine A. Morton Prize from Sarah Band Books, was published in 2020. His poems have appeared in many journals, including The Believer, Boston Review, Gulf Coast, the Paris Review, the Southern Review, and ZYZZYVA. The recipient of the 2016 George Bogan Award from the Poetry Society of America. Davis has received grants and fellowships from Columbia University, the Prague Summer Program, and Vermont Studio Center. He currently lives in San Diego, California, where he teaches English literature at the Bishop School. He was also once hit by lightning, and it felt more or less like you would expect. All right, thank you for being here with us today, Adam.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, Rachel, thanks a lot for jumping in with the intro.
Yeah.
So Adam, before we start, I have to ask, has the lightning hit increased your productivity or creativity, or is it diminished it, or do you basically use it as a tool and you bring out a lightning bolt when you need something to get on the paper? I know I'm joking here, but
I wish I could summon it, like Thor or something like that. It's so funny because my publisher insisted that I put that in the bio, and that has been far and wide the most interesting piece of information in my bio since. But I got struck when I was 14 years old. So it was the day before my sophomore year of high school. And I'll give you the short story. I was playing tennis with my dad and my brother. These storm clouds started rolling through. They were on one side of the net, I was on the other, and there was this big boom and everything just went black. And I could feel, I could see it inside my head. And you've had a little like static shock, right? Everyone's had one of those. Yeah. So it felt like about 10,000 of those going off in your brain at once. And then I screamed in a very macho and manly fashion. And then when I came to, my brother and my dad were standing above me and they said, "You okay? You just got hit by lightning." And I said, "Oh my God." And then I got up and then we went to the indoor courts and finished playing tennis. So this was, this was the 90s. You didn't go to the hospital or something like that. I don't know if I had any extra powers. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you should instruct your students that, somehow if they don't do their homework and use the hit by lightning, it's really not an excuse.
Right. So. Yeah. That's. I mean, I've been fortunate. I know that there's a lightning strike survivors conference that happens in Virginia, and I've wanted to go. I want to write an essay about this at some point, but they go and they share their stories, and I got off lucky. I mean, some people end up with those Lichtenberg figures on the skin, which are like those tattoos, or something. Yeah. Neurological symptoms afterwards. I mean, most people who know me would say that I've had neurological symptoms as a result of that for a long time, but I think I've been okay so far. Knock on wood. So.
We'll check with your wife after this hour.
I'm sure she'll have plenty to say. Yeah.
She'll have plenty of yeah. No, great. So let's begin. Thanks for playing along.
Oh, of course.
So we pretty much start with the same question every week.
Yeah.
Where do you find refuge right now for yourself?
That's a great question. I mean, we were just talking before this. I find it in my children, certainly. I was explaining they're 7 and they're 5, and seeing the way that they engage with the world is refreshing, to say the least. They're still full of curiosity and joy and discovery. And in particular, nature, that's been something that has been even more important in the pandemic. In terms of, I'm lucky I'm in San Diego, so I get to go out for a lot of interesting hikes and I get to feel like a very small thing in this larger world, particularly if you go out to the desert. And then art as well. I think poetry is a great refuge for me. Writing has always been a great refuge. And I was in Philadelphia about a week and a half ago for AWP, and I it was the first time I'd been in a real city, not to disparage San Diego, but it was the first time I'd been in a real city in about 2.5 years. And I went to the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and I hadn't been to a museum in since the beginning of the pandemic. And I mean, I won't say it was quite a spiritual experience, but there was just something so comforting about being around the evidence of humanity in that way. I think of art as this wonderful kind of not, I hate to use the word product or anything like that, but this kind of it's a creative endeavor that allows us to I guess find joy in the world, but also to complicate our understanding of the world too. And it was beautiful to be in the presence of so many pieces like that, and to see so many people still enjoying art. If you follow the headlines, I mean, there's no shortage of things that would crush us on an hourly basis. And I was really moved by how many people are still making time for that, and how important and necessary that kind of endeavor is.
Yeah, great. So let me ask you, so do you think people, listen, there's so much in the news, do you think people are spending more time seeking refuge? What's your, I guess if I was going to say, refuge thermometer, are they leaning more towards, hey, I really gotta go there, get there, experience being in or with refuge, versus just kind of not thinking about it? I'm just trying to understand. You think people are more thoughtful about their own refuge? And
That's a good question. I think that's complicated in some ways by the ways in which we seek refuge. I know that social media it's something of a refuge and also a trap in that way. I know I've certainly felt that. I think maybe we have the ability, thanks to Netflix and other technology now, to take refuge in our own homes in a way that we did not have to before. But I think that I mean, particularly during the early days of the pandemic, when everything really shut down, it seemed that a lot of people, myself included, felt like, I mean, if they weren't sick, obviously, were able to take a moment to kind of take stock and maybe relax. And I guess what I feel now, though, in some ways, is that there's an acceleration, right? There's that sense of, well, we took some time off, but maybe now we need to hurry it back up and get back to business here. I think of, even this, like the idea of Zoom is a testament to how quickly we rebounded and said, we got to still make this work. And I'm thankful for it. Thank you for having me. But it's an interesting quandary in that, how do we take refuge, and what does refuge mean in the light of technology?
Yeah. Well, I'm the Jerry Maguire guy. I like to work the living room. So Zoom is it's an acceptable alternative, but I'd
Sure,
rather, be in a small room and having a live conversation. So, but, someday. In fact, I think the library is having a program, very interesting, Saturday, with 4, I think, psychiatrists to talk about that kind of genre in poetry. And
Huh.
it's going to be live at the library. I can't make it, but just I think
Interesting.
it's the first live. Well, it's our first live poetry program ever.
Wow. Okay.
It would just been pandemic related. So
Wonderful.
are there some poems that you could read for us now that
Sure.
maybe sparked your attention thinking about this?
Yeah. Let me start with maybe one or two from my debut collection, Index of Haunted Houses, and then I'll read maybe one or two newer ones as well that were kind of in
Yeah.
response to the pandemic. But one of the things I've been thinking about, one of the things that always haunted me and continues to haunt me still is, I'm sure you're familiar with it, but the Voyager satellites, right? Remember when we that was one of the great endeavors of mankind, was we built these satellites, the Voyager, and I think the Voyager 2, and we sent them out into the universe. And my understanding now is that I forget which one it is, but one of them is outside our solar system, and it's the it's this man-made object that is now farther from us than anything else has ever been in history. But what I always found so interesting about that was the idea of the recordings that were in it, that I believe Carl Sagan was part of this process where NASA scientists and academics and philosophers all got together and basically said, okay, we're gonna create these golden discs that contain all kinds of information.
Yeah, yeah.
Whatever species might find these, right? It's which is what it's this beautiful idea, right? We don't know if there's life out there necessarily, but I think that that's the idea that's at the central art for me, is we're creating something for something that may or may not exist, but the beauty of it is in the work and in the endeavor. And so on these golden discs, they put snippets of cricket song and bird song and the isosceles triangle and a bit of a Beatles song probably, and a Blind Willie Johnson song, and all these things that would in theory tell an alien race who we are as humans and what we do, because the understanding is that by the time they would find it, we as a planet would probably be gone by that point. And so I've been thinking a lot about that in terms of poetry's ability to capture the time, but then also preserve it. The sense of poetry as being kind of an emotional barometer, to use your term, for our history, right? The history that's felt, maybe not understood, but felt. And so I've always loved that idea, the beauty of this idea. It may never be discovered, but we put it out there, and there's going to be something left of us out there. I think the cave people of Lascaux might have done the same thing when they were scrawling something, a picture of an antelope on the wall. I don't know if they had antelope in France, but you get my gist.
Yeah.
And so part of that for me is also thinking about, in my book, it references several times Mary, Jane, and Pat, who were the first names of the women whose voices were used for the Bell System's automated telephone system. So, back in the day when you'd call them up, it was disconnected, you get that doo doo doo, and then you get this lovely soothing voice telling you that you should keep, the person you're looking for is no longer there, but hang up and then please try again. And what's fascinating is and these voices were just preserved, and you can still hear them. In fact, the Pat Fleet is still alive. She's into her 80s now, I believe. And I got in touch with her a few months ago just to kind of say thanks. And then and she read the poem and she liked it, which I think is kind of the best praise I can think of. But again, it's this haunting idea of a recorded human voice speaking out for something that could be rather banal, but then it gains added importance over time. And so these women, these women function as kind of a spirit, a Greek chorus or spirit guides throughout the book. And so I'll read the two poems in here that reference them. The first one's the Bell System. Good night, Mary, Jane, Pat. Sleep tight, you sweet operators of America. Your voices strung like laundry across this nation, drowsy with a full century's worth of light. There's nothing you can't tell me that I haven't already heard, gift wrapped in your general American grace. But still I wonder, in what chamber of a horse's ant-eaten skull I'll recover my youth. Our human garden grows rich in these green suburbs, and what I feel is not so much loss as a lessening, as if the self was nothing more than a late model sedan crossing the city limit in search of a better resale value. It's funny, this franchise of molecules that fizzes up in each of us, like motels viral along the interstate, some full while others flicker and die. When will the stars rain down like cheap plaster? When will language be little more than a dandruff shaken from our heads? Ladies, you tell me the number I've been calling has been disconnected, but where did the person it belonged to go? Alone on the line, I find only a prairie alive with funneled wind, a nation heavy with wheat and light, its chorus of dim voices locked in a kind of pharmaceutical sleep. I find a system unchanged, charged with electrical pulses that send the receiver scurrying in their cradle, the long hand breath of ghosts rising through switchboards to ask, who's there? Well, tell me, who is there? Who goes? Ladies, please wake up. I want to try again.
Fantastic.
Thank you. I'll maybe I'll read the poem that responds to that one. This catches up with the ladies of the bell system a little bit later. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, here we go. This one's called Ghosts of the Bell System. Ringing, ringing, Mary, Jane, Pat, rooms everywhere are ringing. Rattan furniture is rotting along with my breakfast. Ladies, my morning bowl of cereal and glass of orange juice, ringing. Children at play are ringing, and the cars that confront them are ringing, are slowing to observe their ringing, are thinking of the reclining chairs that await them in the junk yard, in the locus of all rot, where everything is rotten, everything rotting. Ladies, everything is ringing as you always said it would, but I didn't know then. I didn't listen. I knew neither of rot nor ringing, and now your words aren't ringing. They sustain pitch, they arc like swans in my cochlea's cul-de-sac. They nest there, and I ask you, ladies, please, for 3 more minutes sleep. So that's what Mary Jane and Pat have to say there.
Is there like a place on your desk where there's a little memorial or something for those two, or?
It should be for those 3. I think. I mean, you know, I've always been obsessed. The nice thing about all the manhole covers in San Diego still have the Bell Systems imprint on them.
Really?
Yeah, and as part of I guess you would say maybe the promotion for the book, I came up with I created a hotline for the book. So there's a number you can call if interested, and I've made it this kind of interactive hotline where you call in. It's touch tone based, and depending on what number you press, you get a certain poem or a story. And the number is 619-329-5757. And it was kind of a fun, interactive conceit that suddenly became much more important once the pandemic hit. And but it was nice to engage with the I guess the Bell system itself, right? That was it. So,
Was there an option? Is there an option you can get to hear Pat tell you, I'm sorry, you've hit the wrong number.
I wish, I
I
got my sense is she's kind of retired. I think she's still working. But she said that she was about to celebrate, I think, her 80th birthday, and she was very glad to hear from me. But I didn't want to push the the possibility, but I'd love it if she could. That would be fantastic. But
like the voiceover people that use their voice for a living.
Yeah,
they seem to have a lot of longevity with their voice. I mean, I just watched In a World Again, that movie about voiceovers.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Voiceover, Don LaFontaine, and
Yeah.
just great stuff. So no, the voice people, it's just a classic piece of history.
It is, yeah, absolutely, in the sense that it's preserved too. I mean, these, there's certainly a haunting idea in the idea that that even in this moment right now, this right here will be preserved in the digital amber for perhaps as long as YouTube exists, or the Stockbridge Library keeps paying their dues, or whatever it might be. So it's interesting to think these records will endure. I mean, we're more, I don't know, I guess it's fair to say we're the most highly photographed and recorded people in human history, which I don't know, that's an odd thing.
Yeah, it is weird.
I'll tell you what, maybe you want me to read a new poem here? Maybe.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead. Let
me read this one that this is fairly recent, and back in the early days of the pandemic, one of the epicenters of illness at any point, I think, is the All-American cruise ship, which I am not a particular fan. I apologize to anyone who's out there. I kind of view cruise ships as like these giant floating septic tanks, but I appreciate everyone needs a vacation from time to time. But one of the things that happened in the pandemic was that these cruise ships, the COVID just tore through these cruise ships, and people were obviously airlifted off the ships. And many of these cruise ships ended up off the coast of San Diego. So I would drive down to Coronado with my girls, and we'd hang out at the beach, and you could see the cruise ships anchored, a few miles off the beach. And if you looked really closely or had a pair of binoculars, you could actually see that the crew members were still on the cruise ships. They had not been evacuated. And indeed, they were just walking along. And I was really struck by just how lonely an existence that must be, just being completely marooned on this kind of artifact of 20th and 21st century kind of mall culture, and being so close to land and not being able to get off it. I mean, really being trapped there. And so this poem came out of it. It's called Pyrrhic Symphony. 9 months now of news that is not news. There has been weather and there has been food. And on the horizon, cruise ships still crewed, their white dream of hospitality gone silent as the sun. Nothing to do, nothing to do. I sit patiently as an animal in its zoo, my rage fixed like a fascinator on my head. Here on the wholesale Pacific, the electronic doors of electronic stores go untroubled. The wind is against us and supermarkets are full of people hoarding frozen pizza. The freeways are quiet, birds are on the move. The sky is a color the sky hasn't been in a century. Still, we long to get back to business, to buzz and branch out, to beat any price, to honor any coupon, all while the kids, Jeremiah'd on gigs, bring us supper, swooping like bats from business to home and back. Nurse, will you think less of me if I tell you I hurt? That fear pulls through me like a needle drawn by a magnet? That my blood is haunted by the memory of rain? That when I was a child, I watched a house burn down without thought of the people inside it or what they would do without the photographs that marked their family's arrival at their family? That while they were being refugeed in a country so fixed on wealth that car crashes promised not only neck brace but windfall, I thought only of a cup of ice cold milk. I will never know what happened to them. And they have no idea that I write this 35 years later, still warm with the memory of their home's immolation, fire bright against the blackening frame, the desert reverent around it, so quiet you could hear the sand crackle as it turned to glass. I recall a light rain tapping on the temperance of my skull as between the fire and my 5-year-old self, a warm hand of wind ran its fingers over the entire state of Arizona to ask, "How you doing?" And then, before anyone could answer, "Hey, have a nice day."
Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So let me take a little mini break here for a minute. So just to let everyone know, I just put something in the chat. If you want to be on our mailing list, we maintain a poetry only mailing list. Or if you want to read our future poetry hour, you can email me. My address is in the chat. I think Donna and Michael have been here before. Elaine, this might be the first time for you, so welcome. And we also want to have time for some audience interaction, or what I call, don't let the poet off easy. Let's not let the bell system win on this one. Now we want to have a little, if you have a question, if you want to put it in the chat or just unmute yourself, we'll have another Q&A session in about 20 minutes. But if you have something now that you want to throw out there, please do it. Should I tell them they get extra credit if they do it? They get, no, okay.
Hey, John,
I do have a question about inspiring. I was a substitute teacher in the Buffalo Public Schools for about 15 years, and I encouraged children to write poetry, even if it wasn't in a part of the curriculum.
Sure.
And one of the inspiring things that I told them was that Aristotle felt that metaphors were genius. And they would say, "Oh, I want to be a genius." And I wondered if your college students would be inspired to search their minds for metaphors and get creative that way, if you shared with them that piece by Aristotle.
I would love to. I mean, my schooling in the classical Greeks is not very formidable. So that's a wonderful idea. And I mean, as a poet whose primary poetic engine is probably the metaphor, I would love to agree with that at the sake of hubris. But yeah, I think that's fantastic. I think I remember it's the poet Eduardo Corral said one time that he could tell when a student had something when they could describe the sun or moon as something new. Like that's really the goal of poetry in that sense, is to make things new. We've beaten up this language over the course of I don't know, close to 1,500 years probably. So we've done everything we can with it, and yet we can continue to do more. And so that's really the question. If you can make the sun new for someone, if you can make the moon new for someone, if you can make a McDonald's new in some way, then I think that is in itself a kind of genius, because you can ask us to reinvest in the world. Suddenly it's not what we thought, but something greater than that. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's wonderful.
Hey, Michael, you have something?
Yeah, Adam, thank you for sharing. And I just with your last poem,
Yeah.
how do you? It sounds like you started with the idea of the cruise ships, and I was kind of fascinated of how the poem just seemed to bring a lot of sound to it. And is that a technique that you've worked on, or do you just find that just comes as a part of the poetry for you, the sounds that are within?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point. I think that sound has always been important to me in poetry. I mean, I think that one of the benefits of verse is that it is not prose, right? Like we still have that connection to the sung aspect of language and the musicality. Our primary directive in poetry, unlike I think maybe prose, isn't to help people understand something necessarily or to explain something, but rather to engage with language in interesting and compelling ways. And for me, sound is a big part of that. I mean, I don't think I'm a very well, I don't know. I'm a fairly formal poet in terms of I like to work within certain forms that are usually sometimes of my own making. I think that there's an interesting movement right now in contemporary poetry, and that a lot of people are going back towards form. The sonnet, the sestina, the villanelle. Jericho Brown has a new form that he created called the duplex, which is fantastic. It's kind of a mixture of the blues and the sonnet and the sestina. I think it's really interesting and worth checking out. But I think for many of us, I think our earliest exposures to poetry were probably through nursery rhymes in some ways, right? Like those had a certain kind of component of rhyme and assonance, alliteration to them. And one thing I always tell my students too is that the first thing we encounter, even in our in utero kind of pre-consciousness years, is the sound of our mother's heartbeats, of the intestinal tract, of all these things happening. And so we're born into sound, and poetry gives us the opportunity to engage with that, and so that's something that I find particularly rewarding and fun, and something that I'm probably exploring maybe a little bit more now. I'm trying to lean into that a bit more than in the past. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Elaine, any option? Here we go.
Well, I live in Philly and I'm a member of the Philadelphia Museum of Art. So selfishly, I was just curious when you were there, if there are any pieces that spoke to you or inspired ideas for you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I have to say, Elaine is an incredibly talented poet as well. She's being very modest here and trying to pretend that she isn't, like right now she's pretending to be like Bruce Wayne, and she's actually like a Batman type figure. She's a genius poet. And she has a beautiful book called And, which you guys should check out. But what struck me in the museum, I didn't have much time, and so I kind of ran straight to the surrealist wing, and they had a Magritte there who I've always loved, and there was a Dali painting there. I have to say, I know it's not, it's incredibly complicated and controversial, but there's the Duchamp wing, and they have his final piece, Le Temps Donné, which I guess was installed only after his death. And I had never heard of it. And so, you know, you walk into the Duchamp wing and you see the urinal and you see that glass piece, the bride's, I forget the bride assaulted by her bridegrooms, even something, I think it's along those lines. But then there's a small room in the back. It's dark and you walk in there, and I walked in there and I didn't know what was going on. And there's this wooden door in the wall, kind of a medieval looking thing. And it felt like it was out of a Lynch film. Like there was just this foreboding nature to the door being there. And you couldn't open the door. And there were just these it was basically like two little eye holes in it, and you could look through it. And then you don't know whether you should look through it or not, because you don't know if someone's going to poke you in the eye, or there's a suggestion of violence and danger, but also of intrigue. And then what is revealed to be a certain voyeurism, because once you look through it, there's this beautiful pastoral scene, but then also a naked woman holding a lantern in one arm. And you know, obviously, as tends to be the case with the male gaze in these kinds of pieces of art, you can't see her face. And so there's this very strange moment of voyeurism going on, where you end up having a line of people behind you waiting to look through this at a naked woman. And it's very uncomfortable and unsettling. And it's just bizarre. And it's shocking. I think it was installed in the late 60s, and it's still rather shocking in that sense. So I was quite taken back by that. I mean, are you familiar with that piece, Elaine? Are you doing that?
I've never gone to there. I didn't know it was
Oh,
there. Now I have to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hidden all the way in the back. I think a lot of people either were saving their children from it or didn't want to check it out, because it looks like it might lead to a bathroom. And so that's actually why I went back there. And
Oh,
but
boy.
it's a really just bizarre but really impacting piece. You know, it threw me for a loop. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out in my head. It's very, very strange. Which,
But obviously it had an intended impact or an unintended impact.
yeah, no, I think so. I mean, it's well, that was Duchamp. You know, he was still rattling sabers till the end, I guess, or his own.
Yeah, yeah. So Adam, I want to thank everyone for their questions. They were in comments, they were great. So let's move on to the witnessing
Sure.
part, because I guess for me that's something that I don't know, I probably think about every other day.
Yeah.
So what does witnessing mean for you, you know, now, today, or in the last, you know, month or so? What is, you know, because obviously, you know, I read the Times every morning, New York Times,
Yeah.
and I read the Boston Globe. I look, yeah. So at some point in time, I'm not reading the whole stories. I'm in witnessing overload
Yeah.
with the
Oh,
number
absolutely.
of words. So I can't take it all in. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on witnessing.
Yeah, I mean the news. I mean, you're a brave man for reading two different newspapers, because you know, even one feels like you're just being bludgeoned with the horrors of the world. You know, it's not COVID, it's Ukraine, and it's not to make light of it. I mean, these are terrible situations, but you know, I find myself. I mean, it's interesting. You know, I'd never been much of a news junkie, but then during the Trump years, I found myself just insatiably reading the news, because I was trying to figure out what was going wrong in the world next. And then when he was finally voted out of office, I felt a relief. I'm like, okay, great, I can go back to my regular news cycle. And then the pandemic happened, and Afghanistan and the Ukraine and all these other things, and it's so difficult to feel informed, because it's almost impossible, because this news changes. I mean, you know, I use the New York Times website, and it's not even headlines anymore. It's just like this streaming news service where they're telling you every couple minutes. It's the CNN-ification of print media, and it's overwhelming. And so I feel like a very poor witness most of the time, because I don't feel like either A, I'm reading enough, or B, I'm able to absorb what I'm reading. And so for me, the idea of witnessing has gone back again to poetry, and finding quieter moments where I can engage with language and try to make sense of the world as I perceive it through language.
So do you think witnessing, you know, some people view witnessing as requires kind of a political act or some act after you're witnessing. Do you, once again, I'm just trying to get a feel for it. Do you
Sure.
feel like witnessing requires a personal response, or is it just we should just digest it and we don't maybe need to get out there with it?
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the things that has really bothered me. I think there's a certain impotence that's felt. Um, and again, I mean, I wasn't around for the 60s or anything like that, so I can't quite say, but I do feel like there's an impotence that comes with our technology dependent society. I think the idea of protest it can feel sometimes rather toothless if it's done virtually as opposed to being done on the streets in person en masse. I think there's maybe a lack of camaraderie there, and maybe a lack of the physical presence means a lot. And so I know for me, I feel oftentimes that it isn't enough just to digest the news, but I also feel at a loss as to how to approach that in some ways. And I try to comfort myself in some ways by, I'm in the classroom, I'm teaching, I'm hoping that the literature we're engaging with is helping to make students more aware of the world and more aware of their own humanity and the potential for others' humanities as different as those might be. And I think too, the idea of poetry as a kind of emotional record keeper as well. If we can preserve these moments for the future in ways in which they'll still feel fresh. I mean, it's amazing that you can go back to an Auden poem, written in the buildup to World War II, and feel the same things. Or you can go back to the Iliad or the Odyssey.
Yeah.
These human responses don't die, and in fact they're augmented, and they become more potent through time. Interestingly. Yeah, I don't know if that's a
Yeah,
solid.
no, it's great. I think poetry is a great medium to basically bring out the witnessing in words.
Mhm.
I think there is at times a very dramatic effect from poems
Yeah.
that come from some kind of witnessing or some kind of event that happens.
Certainly.
So there's some a few poems you'd like to read with us if you thought about?
Yeah. Let me read a couple here. We'll go back to the book and think about the idea of witnessing. I'll read one, in line with that. There's this is the oldest poem in the book. I think I wrote it back in 2004, perhaps. And I mean, whenever I think about that, I think about grad school. So being back at Columbia for that, and one of my professors and one of the great minds of Western literature and a man of letters, Richard Howard, passed away last week. And so I'm thinking of him because he was certainly someone who preserved language and believed in the power of literature to inform and to inspire, that a life made through books was not just possible, but essential, in the sense that it would make us better and more interesting and more caring people. And this poem in particular, even though as old as it is, it seems to hit differently now as a result of the pandemic. It's called Ghost of Polaroid. Winter is a gaunt gimlet, insomniac in sand. Its new gift, blue and skeletal, thrumming that plague of clock watchers, that lazy bones of morning commutes. Even so, everyone applauds that green sun shyly at the horizon. For who can ignore the Jesus bug crossing the pond? And who hides in clouded soil, sinking to lazier bones? No one is sick, nowhere, no sickness, no one feels sick. And, obviously that feels a little bit different now. Let me read it. Maybe I'll read a newer one too here.
Yeah, read some newer ones. That'd be great.
Let me so
And is this about to be published soon? Are you?
I hope
at
so.
the-
Some of these have been published, some of them haven't. So the Pyrrhic Symphony, that may well end up being the title of my second collection if I ever put it together. But yeah, I have a second collection I'm kind of working on here, and many of these poems are pretty recent. But here, I'll read Interstate Highway System. And this one is I guess kind of the idea of the witness as a road trip, or driving as witness. In the beginning, I was incorporate, plain as skull, in cahoots though inchoate, a suit suited to combust, my body a blunderbuss, brandished in traffic bright as dog bite. I drifted like sand under the wind's hand, saw supercells and speed traps, saw God in the face of a forest fire. The sky was froth, the land foment, ichor and ozone, bee swarm and wildflower, every living thing shivering under the long-range bellow of the transnational semi-trailer truck. Thrush melodies tumbled forth from trees still full of the didactic temper of birds, but I could only froth and foment, my tongue diabetic with word, deeded as property in the gun safe of my mouth. Thereafter, I heeded hints and omens, held hearsay dear as a family Bible, so listened smartly when gossip hopscotched households like house fire. In later years, I leaned prophetic, suffered visions, saw myself sullen on a windswept prairie, saw myself salved in a station flush with tropical disease, snakes shaking in my fists like bad mail. Still, when I slept sound under the promise of diesel. When I dreamt darkly under the auspices of convenience. And when I woke, I ate in the assurance of eating all I could. And when finally I corrected my iconography, I wept to find my eyes ever blue. The sun fled, clouds militant, the moon an ambulance of rock. Under its urgency, I succumbed to the hobby of my body, held my health like a cigarette from the world I watched through drawn curtains, listening all night to the opera of wolves behind the motels of America. Wolves I ran with, wolves I ran from. I lived on stick, I lived on stone. I hunted myself any way I could. There we go.
So I think what was the moon was an ambulance rock?
The moon was an ambulance of rock.
Yeah, I think you just solved your high school dilemma there.
Well, thank you. I'll take that. Yeah,
I was gonna say, I think that was a new one for the moon.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's that was a fun one. That was a fun poem to write, and yeah, that took years. That took years to write that thing. So I'm trying to write longer poems now. I think my Index of Haunted Houses it's more fragmentary, and so I think I'm trying. I've always been more of a minimalist at heart, and so now I'm trying to not go full maximalist, but at least maybe follow the poem through all its threads.
Well, it made me feel maybe that I'm not gonna say a traveling salesman, but someone that was just constantly on the road for their job, and that
Yeah,
every day was another kind of movie experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
I wonder if does the traveling salesman still exist? Is that still no one goes to anymore?
I
Saying,
don't know. I don't know. I think we got to call Willie Loman. We got to find
Yeah,
Willie Loman. No, I don't know. I mean, listen, I don't even think the traveling circus exists. It's like, I don't know.
yeah, that's a
I
good
feel
point.
like I tell my kids about stuff and they're like, you mean people didn't have phones? People
Yeah.
didn't, like,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah. Yeah. So I'll tell you just one funny thing. So I had to meet someone I work with in a Starbucks in Portland. It's about 20 miles away. So I'm waiting outside, and there must be three girls that are probably in your kind of age genre at high school, and
Yeah.
they all have their phones, and they're walking, and their phones are like this. They're
Yeah.
not talking to. They're talking to their phone,
Yeah.
and really not talking to each other. And I'm like, what is that?
It's new world out
Yeah,
there.
yeah, the new world. Yeah, yeah. Scary, scary. When they get that disc, they're gonna turn around, and run the other way.
Yeah.
So you have a few more you'd like to
Sure. Yeah,
read for us?
let me do maybe one or two more here. I'll read
Yeah.
let's see.
Well, while we do that, let's because the hour tends to evaporate
Sure, yeah,
as the clock ticks.
of
So
course.
Donna, Michael, or Elaine, if you have any more questions, comments, feel free to do it. You can put it in the chat also. You don't have to. It's just we want to have Donna. You have something?
I do actually, and I'm really enjoying this. Very nice. And I was moved by your listening to the voices on the telephone,
Yeah,
because I remember those days.
sure.
And that these are people that you couldn't see.
Right.
You could hear them.
Yeah.
And then I'm just wondering if the pandemic has sort of raised your awareness of the human connection, because you connected with people on the cruise ships,
Right.
people that you could not see,
Sure.
but you empathized with them, and then you put it to your poetic music, which I thought was so. In two situations, those are people that you could not see,
Yeah.
but you made a really strong connection. So
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think like Elaine, who's a very talented photographer too. I take a lot of pictures too, and actually in Index of Haunted Houses, I have a number of my photographs in there. So I think I come to poetry from a visual aspect, and I think particularly in photography, there's that idea of having to frame your subject and then also try to. I mean, there is a kind of empathy, I think. I would like to think that goes on there. I always tell my students that every poem is a love poem. It doesn't matter what the poem is about, but the fact that you are sitting down and focusing your creative energies on something in this world means that it is an act of love. Anything that we commit to art is, in a sense, an act of love, and that's something that I find very sustaining. But thank you for mentioning that. I appreciate that. That's great.
Anybody else? Michael?
Well, I guess maybe a quick question. Adam, you mentioned that you're looking to maybe move it a little further into something different.
Right.
And just by your reading, I'm going to have to get the book because I want to see where those line breaks are happening, because it's pretty fantastic. And just I'm just curious, when you're thinking about how to really anticipate the line break, do you just kind of go by what you hear as your way to kind of, I'm going to break it here, or is it some other way?
It's interesting. So I write most of my poems out initially in just blocks of prose. So I don't have any line breaks at first. And then once the poem starts to take shape, I'll start trying different things with it. I think I love the idea of suspense that a line break takes. I don't want any sloppy line breaks. Like, I want them to be intentional in that way. So whether it's the question of breath, or whether it's the question of, could this line stand alone on its own? And does the end of this line suggest something that the next line could then refute? I think, for me, one of the foundational texts in my understanding of line breaks would be William Carlos Williams' The Red Wheelbarrow. If you think about, so much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rain, water, beside the white chickens, right? So there's that suspense created even wheelbarrow broken up. I mean, that's genius. And I think what that could be fanciful, but what makes it imaginative, as Wallace Stevens would say, is that the object is transformed. So wheelbarrow is just something we say every day, but once you break those apart, you have these two separate components that can stand on their own. So that's something that I try to do. I think I've heard the idea of form, or at least in terms of line breaks, described as vessels. So if you think about the poem, I mean, a single poem can be in any number of different forms, like all these different water glasses, but it's up to you to just try and pour the water into these different glasses to then see how whatever's behind those glasses takes new shape as a result as you go through it. So yeah, it's a lot of experimentation, and that's really the fun part for me in that sense, because once you start messing with those line breaks, sometimes you realize that the poem needs more, or it's not working. That's why I have them in prose format to begin with, because I think that there's a danger in putting the poem into line breaks too early or into form too early, and that you can be seduced by the mechanics of the poem when the content of the poem isn't quite there yet.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank
That's
you.
great.
All
Yeah, I'm
right.
getting my my poetry education. Yeah, I'm gonna. I should be going to some school or something. Some. Now I just 76 programs in. I'm finally okay. I got the line break thing down now.
Hey, there you go. This is it. It's
Well, I
all, we're
got
all learning.
sound, line break, ambulance ride. Listen, I write kind of
That's
little
great.
snippets of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
From every reading that just kind of just pops for me. So ambulance rock, I think, is going to be good through 2023.
All
And
right.
maybe even longer. It may never leave. It may just
Right.
be something on the top of my head that looks like a small ambulance that,
that's high praise. And I like how in Maine, you'll just keep it in your head. In San Diego, you'd probably get a tattoo of it or something like that. We're a very ink rich society out here. So not that I'm a
Maine, you just, drive your truck into the water up here. You just, yeah. There's some crazy vehicular behavior in Maine. That's for
oh, I'm
sure.
sure. Oh,
Yeah,
that's great.
people, I don't know, I don't think they ever went to driving school.
Right. Yeah.
There's a lack of I don't know, good behavior or
Okay. Yeah.
boundaries.
It sounds similar out here. I think, I guess you guys might have more room up there, perhaps. It's so congested down here, we can't get away with it.
Yeah. No, it's a nice place to live.
Yeah,
So we got about 7 minutes. Do you want to read one more or two more?
sure.
And
Yeah, let me see here. We'll tell you what, I can read
you
a
can just read
long
one more if you want. Whatever you want to do.
No, we'll tell you. Why don't I read? Maybe I'll read the longest one in the book. How about that? Is everyone
Yeah,
sitting
yeah.
comfortably? Yep.
Whatever happens.
All right, there we go. This one's called Steveson Retrograde. It's the longest poem in the book, and it was written, it was the last poem written for the book. It was actually written after the book was accepted. But I went to undergrad at UC Riverside, which is in the Inland Empire of California. And it's not known for much necessarily, except being like the kind of this way station between LA and Palm Springs. If you're ever driving out there, it's this kind of dusty area between the two. And I have a lot of love and affection for it. But the Inland Empire was also the epicenter of the subprime mortgage crisis back in 2008. Because you had all these tract homes that were built up for people who wanted to work in LA and commute in. And what happened, of course, is that these tract homes just went abandoned. And so you had entire neighborhoods just empty. And that for me was a great and terrible, visual representation of this American idea of the haunted house. We think of America as a haunted house itself, right? We're haunted by our history. We're haunted by the question of possession, whether it's spiritual or actually physical. If we think about the empire of enslavement that we've had here, of genocide, and the question of repossession too, right? This idea that for many Americans, the idea of home ownership is this pillar that we've kind of built our dream upon, and the fact that can then be taken back is a scary thing. And so I wanted to play with that a little bit, and I found this epigraph, which comes from something that in law school is known. I've never been to law school, but if there are lawyers in the audience, you might know this. It's called the Ghostbusters ruling. And the gist of the story is that back in the early 90s, a man in New York bought a house, but he was told by neither the family selling it nor the realtor that this house was considered to be haunted. And he did not believe in ghosts. He didn't particularly care about ghosts, but like any red-blooded American, he cared about his resale value. And he thought, no one's going to buy this place now. So he sued the realtor and the family for a rescission because he wanted to get his money back. And they went all the way to court. And what happened was, for the first time in legal history, the court sided with the supernatural. And they said that for all legal purposes, this house is indeed haunted. And it's a great text to read, even if you don't understand the law like me. There are lots of references to Hamlet's ghost and to the Amityville horror, and lots of funny little jokes about that. So I wanted to take that and play with it, and that's what it is. This is a poem in 6 parts, and it's called Steveson Retrograde. As a matter of law, the house is haunted. Stambovsky versus Ackley, 1991. 1. If a house is haunted like a radio is haunted, if a body is a radio of blood, if a body of ghosts hums like blood over a valley of bone, if blood is a government of ghosts, if bones grow green as cash in the foreign national of our ghosts, if homes bloom along the interstate of our blood, if from granaries of bone we rise in the newspaper dawn, if amongst the chattering of water we rise like a benediction over the auspices of convenience, if ghosts we rise like ghosts, if we collect like desire in a desert payphone, if we ring like coins in the cup of night, if we lie like coins in the palm of Nebraska, if the sun is an argument with ghosts, if the sun's argument plays out in squares upon the floor of this home, if the day winds down like a watch, if heaven is a horology, if desire is the body we give the past, if at night termites tick like time in our bones, if in these bones we find the body's foreclosure. 2. If in foreclosure we find the math of our homes, if the math of our homes is the math of fire, if the math of fire is the math of money, if the math of money is a map of interstate rain, if grief is a cup, let me drink from it and be drunk. If drunk and wandering, if thirsty and moneyed, if coined and fashionable, if drunk and wandering like a dog through the supermarkets of the night, if I want the question of a home, if I want as a windmill wants the wind, if I want that lesson, if I want the lesson that breaks me, if I want the desert and its wind, if I want to throw myself to it, if I want never to be seen again, if by the light of dentistry my teeth anoint ledgers lavish with loss, if in these ledgers every tooth is a house, if debt is a tooth the dentist will not pull. 3. If awake, if waking, if awake in the wake of sleep, if sore-eyed and stubbled, if poorly fed yet feed, if coffeed and quiet, if humming, if awake and humming in the halls of convenience, if aching under the auspice of birds whose voices are feathered and vaulted and keyed, if of our voices we build a bank, will it not speak? If we atone, if we in our homes atone, if we sink alone into the chloroform fiduciary of home, if we pill and drone, if we alone are alone, if we tether ourselves to the stones of our homes, if we sink to lazier bones, if we believe bankruptcy is a throne, if along the rails, the whistle no longer blows. 4. If we choose, if we had chosen, if we had been better and awake, if we had accounted, if we had awakened from the tax of sleep to the muted bells of bills that rang like fire in the foundries of past lovers, if lovers and we sleep, if like fire we build a forest for overages, if for a surcharge we survive the past, if of the past we make a ministry of the past, if we pass like fire over the waters of ambition, if upon those waters we find our faces and weep, if weeping stops, if stopping stops, if the ghost math of money stops, if named, if a name is cast like a coin over the auspices of convenience, if I call a name, will that name call back? If I call, will I call collect? If I collect like credit, if I credit a ghost. 5. If named for a ghost, if in the name of all ghosts, if the name is name that calls all ghosts to waking, if waking ghosts. If ghosts rise like desire from the granaries of sleep and dress for the newspaper dawn, if newspapered and awake, if hunted by convenience stores, if alone and named, if nameless and unknown, if anonymous as light, if mute as tax, if a dividend of sun sits like a loan upon the floor of this home, if silence is alone, if the sun is a school, if ghosts are a lesson drawn in sand, if the sun looms like a school of blood over subdivisions of ghosts, if subdivided, if the desert like a house of belief is a body dividended with blood. 6. If belief is a ghost, if blood is weather, if bones are birds in a body of fog, if debt is a body clothed with birds, if the body is a myth in the municipal pool, if birds gather like fists of cash on federal clotheslines, if ghosts tremble on foreign buildings like cups of fog, if cash is the myth in the myth of collection, if myth is a lesson in collective loss, if we are learned and lean, if we are lessoned by learning, if learning is a lean-to loss, if a ghost is a home, if a ghost is a thing bankrupt of bone, if land is land only if it is lessoned in homes, if we like land grow green with the memory of our blood, if we grow and with land, if we be, if land is, if we be and with land, never let us be without, if never without us, our ghosts. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah. And we are going to have to close out our session because we're in a time warp, a Zoom time warp. Yeah, no, we,
Wonderful. Well,
yeah, we
thank
like to, yeah, no, fantastic. Adam, as I said, I have so many images flying around in my head right now. I'm going to have to, wear one of those lead helmets so that, that nothing else can come in. So, no, really, it really just, what a fantastic hour. And
thank you.
Donna, Michael, and Elaine, thanks for joining us. Adam,
you.
just fantastic. So,
I appreciate that. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for your questions. It's so good to see you.
and let's
Yep.
get out of the corner next year. Let's come on.
Someday, if I can build a wing, I'll be. I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
who do I have to call? Who do I have to call? I think I'll call UC Riverside and see if they can help you out.
Yeah, see if they can help me out. Maybe an alumni fund there.
All right. Take care.
Thanks,
great.
Thanks,
Rob.
everyone.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you
See
all.
you guys.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Appreciate
yeah.
it.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.